and voters in Billings would elect vote for 8 legislators. It had the function of keeping out people with different ideas, keeping out women, and in Billings, they always elected a Republican ticket until a few Democrats like Scaff Sheedy squeaked in, but it was known as the Straight 8, and they were solid Republican. Just like Butte, solid Democrat, and every 40 or 50 years a Republican sneaks in there, but usually not for more than one session. But I really do think that citizens need to get more involved in their legislature and figure out ways to make it less dysfunctional and follow it more. We have a wonderful website called Laws where you can follow the legislature just like a legislator can on the floor. All the bills are there. When amendments are proposed, they're on there. The fiscal notes, the budget, everything is on there. So it's there for people to see. When I was a young reporter in Missoula in the 1970s after I left Helena, the editorial writer there was a man named Sam Reynolds, and Sam wanted to read every bill, and so about every 2 or 3 weeks, these huge stacks of bills from the legislature, and he would read them. Well, now you can look at them the same day they're introduced. So I think we have a great opportunity to try to fix our legislature in however we want, but it's not working very well now. We could all speak for hours on other things about the Constitution. I'm going to stop now, but it's been fun to talk to you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks so much. That was terrific. A lot to think about. It's been 2 days of hard thinking, good stuff. So the constitutional conversations will recommence at about 1:30. And again, if the delegates could come here along with Chuck and Rich, and we do want to take a photo. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you especially delegates for being here today.
Again, thank you for the opportunity.
Civic television that Stephen is creating of these proceedings. And Stephen just explained to me that the film will be run next weekend, is that correct? Yeah. Next weekend starting at Saturday morning at 9 a.m.? Excellent. So that's obviously here in Helena, so if you have access to Helena Civic Television, you can see that here in Helena starting next Saturday at 9 a.m.
That's statewide.
That's statewide, excuse me, that is statewide. Critical point. And Stephen emphasized that he shares or is happy to share this film with other community access television stations. So it's clear that this is going to be available. We at Humanities Montana will probably include excerpts on our website at some point, and we'll put out the word about that. But anyway, thank you for asking. That's a great question. I just wanted to mention that Joe Valiant just told me that some of his articles are available here at the front. And Joe had mentioned that several folks were interested in copies, so if you want a copy of his prepared remarks, please grab those. Very nice moment, I have to say. Maynard Ellingson, toward the end of the lunch, said, I really should recognize someone. Is that someone here? I'll recognize him later when he's here. I'll just give you the name. His name is Larry Pettit. Larry Pettit was the first commissioner of higher education. And I know this is shameless and sounds too coincidental. Oh, this is perfect. Larry is walking in as I speak. So this is like the royal entrance. But Larry is, yes, you guessed it, on our board of directors. And so Larry is the one who had to implement. I'm sorry, Larry.
Which one of my many achievements are you?
First commissioner of higher education. And so actually Larry had a terrific editorial that appeared at least in the Great Falls Tribune, maybe some other newspapers this past week, about that particular provision of the state constitution and how he was part of implementing it. So in any case. A reminder that at 3 o'clock we're going to have a summing up session. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then this evening at 5, we're going to have a remarkable event where we're going to honor 9 Montana Humanities heroes. That will be right here in this room, so you don't have to go far. And so I hope you can join us for that. It's also the kind of closing reception for the constitutional conversations. And I again want to thank Carroll. Carroll's been terrific at hosting the event. Carroll is in fact the one sponsoring the reception this afternoon. So if we could take a moment to thank Carroll for their help. And now we turn to Conversation 5, I believe it is. And this focuses on state sovereignty in 2 constitutions. And I'm simply going to introduce Jeff Rentz, who is the moderator, and then Jeff will take it from there. Truth to tell, Jeff and I go back a ways. We lived in Billings together for a number of years and took trips to the Madison River, though as best I can recall, neither of us caught a fish, but that's another story. But Jeff is a proud graduate of the University of Montana with degrees in, is it botany, I believe? Yes, botany and law. He has taught in the clinical program at the School of Law at the University of Montana since 1993. His emphases are in civil rights, criminal law and procedure, and constitutional law. So please join me in welcoming Jeff Rentz and his panel.
Thank you, Ken. We're in the home stretch. It's the 5th inning. There's one more set of at-bats coming up with Bob Brown and my good friend Pat Williams. But now we're going to talk about state sovereignty in 2 constitutions, which is a nice creative way of saying we're going to talk about the boring issue of federalism, which is a nice way of saying we're going to talk about some real exciting stuff. In 1991, I was asked to represent a Montana union before the Montana Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission was considering a rule to require drug testing of intrastate, not interstate, but intrastate pipeline workers. We argued that the adoption of such a rule that would require urinalysis testing was a violation of the workers' privacy, and therefore a violation of Section 10 of the Montana Declaration of Rights. The Public Service Commission was considering such a rule because a small agency of the U.S. Department of Transportation was telling them that they had to adopt it. And so for quite some time, I asked myself, how is it that some small administrative agency can come to a state and tell an elected body, because the Public Service Commission is elected, that they must act in a way that violates the state constitution? We won that battle, but we ultimately lost the war because the Department of Transportation went back to Congress and got the necessary authorization, and the rule was later adopted. But we're going to talk today about how it is that that can happen. We're going to talk about several things. So first, take out your U.S. Constitution. The one on the 8.5 by 11 page. Turn to Article 4, or I'm sorry, Article 6. And I'm going to read the provision we're going to talk about. This is what we know as the Supremacy Clause. It says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So now turn to the 10th Amendment, which is one page over. The 10th Amendment says, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. These 2 provisions in the last century have spawned a cottage industry among lawyers, among politicians, among political groups, the latest of which is in the form of the Tea Party movement, many of whom espouse a very strong 10th Amendment, that is designed to return powers to the states and to the people at the expense of the power of the federal government. One thing I do want to say about the 10th Amendment, because it may not come up in the course of our discussion today, is that the view of the meaning of the 10th Amendment changed about mid-20th century, about the 1970s. It was once thought that this provision spoke about the sorts of things that states did uniquely, as opposed to what the federal government did. And so it was once thought that things like education, like agriculture, were purely within the purview of the state. And therefore, the federal government really had no role in those sorts of things. That changed in the mid-1970s when the United States Supreme Court said, no, we're not following that sort of doctrine. The 10th Amendment is something that allows the states, through their representatives, to act in Congress in a way to ensure that they can protect their own state powers, because they're all states, they all act collectively, they all have senators elected by state. Therefore, Congress will mediate the question of where the powers fall. And that is the doctrine today, although it's still a doctrine that's under criticism. Now next, I want you to turn to page 8 of the Montana Constitution. If you've got a pencil or a pen in hand, I want you to take that out. All right. And look at section 14, adult rights. And I'm going to read it. A person 18 years of age or older is an adult for all purposes. There is a comma there. I want you to change that comma to a period. Because we will also talk about the language that follows and how that relates to the exercise of federal power in relationship to the states. So with that introduction, I want to introduce our panel. And we won't mark them up. On my immediate right is Stuart Rhodes. Stuart Rhodes is a lawyer. He's practiced in Kalispell and Polson. Stuart served 3 years on active duty in the United States Army. One must question his good judgment because he was a guy who liked to jump out of perfectly good airplanes. And I want to thank you for serving, Stuart. Stuart, after he left the Army, having jumped out of one too many perfectly good airplanes, because he was injured in the course of the parachute jump, attended UNLV. He graduated from UNLV with highest honors. From there, he went on to Yale Law School, where he won a prize for one of his writings. Interestingly, Stuart is a sculptor. He's been a firearms instructor. He's been a self-defense instructor. Notably and currently, Stuart Rhodes is currently the president of the Oath Keepers. The Oath Keepers is an organization of soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and law enforcement officers who are called upon to remember that the oath that they took when they entered the service, when they became officers, when they entered law enforcement. That is, the oath that at its heart says, we swear to protect and defend the Constitution. When I was, I'm also a veteran, when I was with the ACLU, some people would say, you were in the Army and so on and so on, why you were with the ACLU? And I said, I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. And I'm still carrying out that oath as the legal director of the ACLU.